right. Hello, everyone. It is Tuesday. We are going to pick up where we finished off last time. So, yesterday we finished at question 10 of the SAT Practice 5. So, this is the SAT's official practice tests. If you want to follow along with me, you can find these on the official College Board website. So, without further ado, I'll just introduce myself quickly and then we can go ahead and get started. So, my name is Kate and I am a humanities tutor. So, I work with students who are studying for the SAT or the ACT and work with students also who are taking a humanities class in school, like, AP English or English 9 or something like that. If you're writing college essays, I can help you out with that as well. I do these videos just to give you a sense of what a lesson with me would be like, to get a sense of if my teaching style is something that you would work well with. So you can find me online at stembrainstutor.com, and there's links to my social media accounts there. Thanks so much. All right, let's go ahead and dig in. So, number 11, let's just take a look at what kind of question this is. So, it says, according to the text, what was surprising to scientists studying the seismic activity data from NASA's InSight lander? So, surprising is the keyword. If I just look for that keyword, I find it right there. This discovery was surprising to scientists as they expected that the Mars quakes would originate from all over the planet because of the cooling of the planet's surface. So, what we can infer from this is that they didn't happen all over the planet. They happened in one specific spot or maybe a few notable spots. So, we don't even really need to read the entire paragraph to determine that. So let's take a look at the answer choices and see what we would choose. So, what's surprising to scientists? So, we already have a prediction in our minds about what a correct answer would look like. And what we're going to choose then is, let's see, D. All the Mars quakes started from the same location on the planet. So that's this one here. And let's just double check because we didn't read the whole thing. Right here, it does say they all started from the same location on the planet. So we can double check ourselves if we're not sure. So these types of questions are meant to be very, very quick, like literally 3-4 seconds sometimes if you're really fast. And we can go on to number 12 with that in mind. So this one says, according to the text, what do some historians suggest about Maya civilization? So we're looking for essentially a claim or a hypothesis because they're saying, what do they suggest? Like, what's the inference that scientists are making based on the data that they have? So let's take a look at what they provide to us. So this says, I'm going to just check the very last sentence because if I'm thinking about something like a result, I'm going to be looking at the end. So indeed, and we can even find if we wanted to use suggest as a keyword, we can in fact find it right here. It says some historians suggest that Maya mathematicians inherited it from the Olmec civilization, which flourished in the region 2,400 to 3,600 years ago. Okay, so what do they suggest? They inherit something. Let's find out what something is. The symbol for the number 0. Okay, so let's just jump down. We know what we expect the answer to look like, and let's just find something that aligns. So A says, Maya civilization acquired the use of 0 from the Olmec civilization. Okay, seems good. Let's hold on to that. B says, Maya civilization respected its historians more than it respected its mathematicians. There's not really any evidence to suggest that in the part that we read. C says, Maya civilization was highly secretive about its intellectual achievements. This doesn't seem true either. Just there's no evidence to suggest that. Maya civilization tried to introduce its writing system to other civilizations. So this would be yesterday when we talked about different kinds of question types or answer choice types. I mentioned that one of them, one of the classic sort of wrong answer choices is something that is partially correct or inverted, because the idea is that you will be rushing through the test and you might see keywords, or you may, they may be testing you on reading comprehension to see if you interpreted it the right way around. And in this case, we can see that it's actually the Maya that are getting it from the Olmec civilization, not the other way around, right? So this one is A. Okay, so 13, The Bet is an 1889 short story by Anton Chekhov. In the story, a banker is described as being very upset about something, blank. Which quotation from The Bet most effectively illustrates the claim? So we are trying to find a quote about someone being very upset about something. So let's just find something that represents that. So the first one says, then the banker cautiously broke the seals off the door and put the key in the keyhole. That's not it. They're being cautious, not angry, right? This one says, it struck 3 o'clock. The banker listened. Everyone was asleep in the house and nothing could be heard outside but the rustling of the chilled trees. So that one, the banker's, it is talking about the banker again, but it's describing a moment of like withholding. So he's listening, he's, it's 3 o'clock, presumably in the morning because everyone's asleep. So he's trying to, be really cautious. So again, not really acting very upset. This one says, the banker, spoilt and frivolous with millions beyond his reckoning, was delighted at the bet. This one is not upset. It's opposite of that, right? He's very happy. And then D says, when the banker got home, he lay on his bed, but his tears and emotion kept him for hours from sleeping. So this one is D because it describes that he's having these very strong emotions of maybe sadness or regret or frustration, something that might cause someone to cry, right? So this one is going to be D. Okay, let's keep it moving. This one is a graph question, but again, it's really not as scary as it looks. I'll just show you my strategy for working through these types of questions. So first of all, I'm just going to totally ignore all of this. Don't even read it yet. We're just going to look at the question right here. I'm just going to double check that you can see it. Yes. Okay, great. So it says, which choice most effectively uses data from the table to complete the statement? Okay, so let's read this section. So it says, among candidate species for de-extinction, this problem would be especially concerning for the blank. Okay, so we need to probably read a little bit more because we need to define what this problem is. Researchers are concerned that the longer a species has been extinct, the less likely it is that a suitable habitat still exists for them. Okay, so the oldest one would be, or I guess the one that became extinct the longest amount of time ago, right, would be the one that we should choose because they're the most likely to have, been put out, right, by the changing environment. So let's take a look. So the Huaya became extinct 1907. Caribbean monk seal became extinct 1952. Passenger pigeon 1914. Okay, so like we certainly know it's not the Caribbean monk seal, right? And we know it's not the passenger pigeon because 1907 is of course older than those years. Saber-toothed tiger, or saber-toothed cat, I guess, says 11,000 years before present. Okay, pretty old, right? Woolly mammoth says 6,400 years. Okay, so cross this out. And of course, we'll cross out Hoya as well. This one should be saber-toothed cat. So let's take a look at the answer choices. So this should say, So A says a passenger pigeon, which became extinct only a few years after the Hoya. So that one, not the choice. Saber-toothed cat, which became extinct 11,000 years ago. Okay, that's what we want, but let's just double check. Woolly mammoth, which became extinct several thousand years before the saber-toothed cat. No. Caribbean monk seal, which became extinct in 1952. Okay, this one is saber-toothed cat. Alrighty. So really shouldn't scare you. These questions are meant to just test your comprehension. They're not trying to trick you. The main thing that this is going to test you for is time management. So if you get stressed out by the look of this question, it might take you a little longer to buckle down and get the answer. But you know better, so you can apply your strategies that we're talking about here. 15. The Yellow Wallpaper is an 1892 short story by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. In the story, the narrator expresses mixed feelings about her surroundings. Okay, so we're looking for mixed feelings. By the way, this is a fantastic short story. In case you haven't read it, I would highly recommend it. It's a little sad, though. So it says, which quotation from the Yellow Wallpaper most effectively illustrates this claim? So same drill as before. We're going to just read through them and see which one it is. So mixed feelings. A says, this wallpaper has a kind of sub-pattern in a different shade, a particularly irritating one, for you can only see it in certain lights and not clearly then. This one doesn't really describe mixed feelings. She just doesn't like this particular aspect of the wallpaper, right? B says, by moonlight, the moon shines in all night when there is a moon. I wouldn't know it was the same paper. This one doesn't imply how she feels about the paper one way or another. She's just describing a contrast due to the environment. C says, I'm really getting quite fond of the big room, all but that horrid wallpaper. Okay, so here we have fondness expressed against, feeling like she hates this wallpaper. She finds it horrid, right? So I really like this one so far. D says, the color is repellent, almost revolting, a smoldering, unclean yellow, strangely faded by the slow turning sunlight. So that one's all negative again. So this one is C. So I hope you can see here there's really no tricks to these questions. These ones are pretty quick off the mark. If you have your strategies and you're not feeling too nervous about test taking, this should go pretty quickly for you. So we're going to do a couple more today. So this one is another graph question. You can actually see it spans both columns here. So let me just read the question first. So it says, which choice most effectively uses data from the graph to complete the statement? So we'll do the same thing we did before and take a look at the statement. So the statement is, the researchers concluded, I'm right here by the way, the researchers concluded that the oxygenation may have been important in the Alboran Sea, but not near the Mauritanian coast, since blank. Okay, so why was oxygenation not important near the Mauritanian coast, even though it was important near the Alboran Sea? Okay, so let's just see what we can find about the difference here. So this also says, what is this measuring? Ratio of manganese to calcium in samples from the Alboran Sea and Mauritanian coast. And then the x-axis is approximate years before present in thousands, so that's just time. And then the y-axis is manganese to calcium ratio, micromoles per mole. All right, great. So let's just test these statements and see which one matches up. So A says a substantial increase in oxygenation in the Alboran Sea corresponded with the local decline in El Pertusa, but the opposite relationship between oxygenation and El Pertusa was found near the Mauritanian coast. Okay, so let's see. Let's give our paragraph a little read so that we understand if they're going to give us some more information about what the relationship is between these factors. So the paragraph says, and I'll read it to you, the population of the coral Lophelia pertusa, so that's what we're talking about, declined significantly around 9,000 years ago in the Alboran Sea. Okay, So this is about here on the chart, 9,000 years ago, in the Alboran Sea, and around 11,000 years ago near the Mauritanian coast. Okay, so this one, I'm going to put a triangle for the Alboran Sea. Hopefully that makes sense. And then 11,000, so that's here, for the Mauritanian coast. Okay, so it's important to mark where those are so that we can assess whether or not these relationships are, correctly portrayed in the answer choices. So it says, using the ratio of manganese to calcium, which inversely correlates with ocean oxygenation levels. So that just means like if one goes up, the other goes down, right? Marine scientist Rodrigo da Costa Portillo Ramos and colleagues evaluated whether oxygenation played a role in the declines of El Pertusa. The researchers concluded that oxygenation may have been important in the Alboran Sea, but not near the Mauritanian coast. Okay, so what I'm noticing is that there's really no change, no substantial change in the Mauritanian coast marker here. It's like all within this 10 micromoles per mole range, all between 10 and 20 here. Whereas as soon as we pass this 9,000 mark right here, we get a sharp drop off of this ratio of manganese to calcium in the Alboran Sea. Okay, so let's take a look at our answer choices. So it says a substantial increase in oxygenation in the Alboran Sea. So what this would mean is like if the ratio of manganese to calcium goes down, that means oxygenation would go up. Okay, so this is so far true. A substantial increase in oxygenation in the Alboran Sea corresponded with the local decline in El Pertusa. So that part is true. Okay, so check. But the opposite relationship between oxygenation and El Pertusa was found near the Mauritanian coast. Okay, I don't really like this side because it says the opposite relationship, implying that there's a strong correlation in the opposite direction for this, but we don't really see that happening. So let's look at B. So B says El Pertusa declined in the Alboran Sea during a period of substantial local decline in oxygenation, but El Pertusa declined near the Mauritanian coast during a period of little local change in oxygenation. So it's true that El Pertusa declined near the Mauritanian coast during a period of little local change. So that part is correct. Let's evaluate the first part. So it says El Pertusa declined in the Alboran Sea, that's here, during a period of substantial local decline in oxygenation. So because we know that it is inversely correlated with the ratio of manganese to calcium, this is actually not true, right? So like oxygenation increased during this time. So this is not true. C says oxygenation in the Alboran Sea was higher before the decline in El Pertusa than after the decline, whereas oxygenation near the Mauritanian coast was relatively low both before and after the decline in El Pertusa. Okay, so let's check this against D because it's actually talking about very similar things. So let's just test them both at once. So oxygenation in the Alboran Sea tended to be substantially higher than oxygenation near the Mauritanian coast during the period studied. Yeah, so that this one I think is the true one. I'll explain why. So for C, this one, again, these numbers are higher than these numbers, and because it's inversely correlated, it's not, it wouldn't go in this direction, right? So like if manganese and calcium is high over here, it would be low oxygen, right? And vice versa. So before the decline in El Pertusa, the oxygenation numbers were lower at least, okay? So this one, D, oxygenation in the Alboran Sea tended to be substantially higher, always true, right? No matter what the situation is, than oxygenation near the Mauritanian coast during the period studied. Like obviously true, okay? So, and that backs up our statement, right? Like it's a different situation. Okay, great. 17 well, before I go into 17, I'll just say like these graph questions aren't necessarily, scientifically challenging. Like you're not supposed to offhand understand what the relationship between manganese, calcium, and oxygen is, nor are you expected to know what manganese is, right? Like you might not even know, and that's okay. It doesn't matter. If you get distracted or get stressed out because there are a lot of words that you don't know, or you feel like there's a lot of jargon being thrown around, just know that that is what makes these questions difficult. It's not that you're expected to know any science, right? So the reason it's in the reading section is because you are just looking at, your reading strategies when you're thinking about solving for the answer here. So what I would just do is take a deep breath, take a step back, and just, practice your strategies, right? Like do exactly what we just did there, go step by step, figure out, what are the variables that you need to understand in order to be successful, and then check them off one by one. Okay, great. So, number 17 says, which choice most logically completes the text? So, what this means is we're just going to make a prediction about where the paragraph will go next if it continued, because we can see the section here is at the very end of the paragraph. And same thing for the next question, actually. So we're going to use the same strategy in both questions. Okay? So let's see. Okay, so I'll just read this to you. It says, the Younger Dryas was a period of extreme cooling from 11,700 to 12,900 years ago in the Northern Hemisphere. Some scientists argue that a comet fragment hitting Earth brought about the cooling. Others disagree, partly because there's no known crater from such an impact that dates to the beginning of the period. In 2015, a team led by Kurt Keyer detected a 19-mile-wide crater beneath a glacier in Greenland. The scientists who believe an impact caused by the Younger Dryas claim that this discovery supports their view. However, Keyer's team hasn't yet been able to determine the age of the crater. Therefore, the team suggests that blank. Okay, so like I said, we're going to make a prediction here. So for this type of question, we can trust our reading comprehension. We can trust our gut feeling about what should come next. And then, come up with what we expect the next sentence to cover, and then find that in the answer choices. The idea behind this strategy is that if you come up with the prediction before you kind of spoil yourself, right, for the answer choices, like before you read ahead, essentially, you don't get this sort of power of suggestion effect, right? You don't start second guessing yourself as much. You just say like, oh, no, that's not what it is. Like, next one. If you encounter a question that you're pretty sure about, and then you read the answer choices as you're checking them off, and you're like, wait a second, like that one actually sounds better than what I came up with, of course you can choose it. But most of the time you can choose, what is based on your prediction, because your gut feeling is usually accurate on these types of questions. So let's make a prediction. So we know that the sentence is, however, Keyer's team hasn't yet been able to determine the age of the crater. Therefore, the team suggests that blank. So maybe we're looking for something like, there's still, not enough evidence to suggest that this, that this crater belongs to that impact, that contributed to the cooling, or even as far as saying something like, an impact at all may not have existed, right? Because the leading cause, or the leading sort of evidence for the impact theory, of course, would be a visible crater. And if this one can't be proven to be that, then that theory may not yet be proven, right? So let's take a look at the answer choices. So A says it can't be concluded that the impact made the crater was connected to the beginning of the Younger Dryas. Okay, so like pretty close. Let's take a look at B. So it says it can't be determined whether a comet fragment could make a crater as large as 19 miles wide. I don't really like that one. It's really, really specific. Last time we talked about, certain things that would disqualify one of the answer choices. One of them is being too broad. One of them is being too narrow. Another is being inverted or, slightly wrong, like mostly right, but a little thing is twisted. And then, of course, there's the correct answer, right? Sometimes on more straightforward questions, that third option, the like slightly wrong or inverted type question, is sometimes just like totally replaced by just an outlandish option, right? Like one that is not true. But in most cases on the SAT and on the ACT, if you're studying for that, it's going to be kind of this like, I'm skimming and I might have missed something, but really, it's just trying to get you. So this one, let's move on to C. Scientists have ignored the possibility that something other than a comet fragment could have made the crater. So not true, because CARES team is also a group of scientists, right? So like it's not all scientists in general that are making this claim. So this one would be too broad, right? So B is too narrow, C is too broad. It's generalizing scientists when that's not the case. D, the scientists who believe an impact caused the Younger Dryas have made incorrect assumptions about when the period began. So this one is the one that's like somewhat true, okay? Because we are saying there's a specific group of scientists who believe this, implying that there's also a specific group of scientists who don't. We know that they may or may not have made incorrect assumptions. Like that's what's up for debate in this paragraph. But the incorrect thing is that it's not necessarily about when the period began. Okay. So we know, at least at this point, both groups of scientists agree about the time period. They say, as a fact, at the beginning, the Younger Dryas was a period of extreme cooling from this time to this time. Okay. So far, I mean, like, evidence can always come out to the contrary, but like right now we're just treating this as a fact, right? So this one is A. 18, same type of question, which one most logically completes the text? So let's just go ahead and read it, and then we'll make our prediction. So this one says, in 2016, biological anthropologist Heather F. Smith and her team investigated the evolution of the appendix, an intestinal organ that is present in some mammals, including humans, but is generally thought to have no function. Studying 533 mammal species, the team found that the appendix has emerged independently across multiple lineages in separate instances, and, significantly, hasn't disappeared after emerging in specific lineages. Moreover, the team determined that species with the organ tend to have higher concentrations of lymphoid tissue, which supports immune responses in the cecum, the organ the appendix is attached to. Therefore, the team hypothesized that the appendix likely something, okay? So we can make a prediction here. So broadly, one of the predictions could be like, the appendix actually does have a function, biologically speaking, right? Like there's a reason it hasn't gone away. More specifically, we could make a prediction that's like, and that reason is it has some impact on the, presence or absence of lymphoid tissue. And so people's immune systems would be affected by the presence or absence of an appendix. Okay. So A says, was once present in many non-mammal species, but has since disappeared from those lineages. So this one is not true. They talk about, for example, mammals only. So they're only studying mammals. Additionally, they say it hasn't disappeared from mammals. So really nothing about that is in the text at all. B says, has been preserved in certain mammal species because it benefits their immune systems. So that's a reasonable hypothesis. Let's hold on to that. C will emerge in a greater number of mammal species because it may serve a necessary function in the immune system. Okay. I'll talk about that later. So D says produced higher concentrations of lymphoid tissue in mammals in the past than it does currently. Okay. So this one is not correct because even though it does, give you those buzzwords of like concentrations, lymphoid tissue, mammals, right? It's got all the right words in it or whatever. So if you're skimming through this, you might think like, oh yeah, that one mentions blah, 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 right? But that's not good enough for us. So they're, in D, they're saying like the takeaway is that, appendices have produced more of this. And there's really no evidence to suggest that like there once was more than there is now, right? It's mostly just sort of the presence or absence has some impact on lymphoid tissue. So we're not really estimating how it's changed over time. So I want to talk about the difference between B and C. So B says has been preserved in certain mammal species because it benefits their immune systems. And this one is a really general claim, okay? So like nothing wrong with that. C says will emerge in a greater number of mammal species because it may serve a necessary function in the immune system, okay? So the key difference between these two is that C is sort of making a prediction about the evolutionary path of Mammalia, right? They're saying like even species that don't have appendices now, or like if new mammal species evolve in the future, they might have appendices where their forefathers did not, right? Because it has this immune function. I would say that that's going too far based on the logic that we have in the paragraph. So this one I believe is B. Again, like I'm not saying that C doesn't make any logical sense at all. I'm just saying that based on what we know, the clearest and most logical, which is what they're asking for, right? Prediction for what would come next is this first baseline. It has been preserved in certain mammal species because it benefits their immune systems. Now, if you wanted to then use that to make a further prediction, you could say something like C, like, oh, maybe, that is selected for, right, over time. But that's not where we're going to start. So this one is B. Alrighty, so let's just finish this page and then we'll call it for the day. So this is the same type of question, number 19. Which choice most logically completes the text? So let's go ahead and read it. So it says, some ethicists hold that the moral goodness of an individual's actions depends solely on whether the actions themselves are good, irrespective of the context in which they are carried out. Philosopher L. Sebastian Purcell has shown that surviving works of Aztec philosophy express a very different view. Purcell reveals that these works posit an ethical system in which an individual's actions are judged in light of how well they accord with the individual's role in society and how well they contribute to the community. To the extent that these works are representative of Aztec thought, Purcell's analysis suggests that what? Okay. So, we have this system, right, where not only is it about how the individual's role is played out by these, so like maybe if they were, like a leader in the society, they might be judged against leadership qualities. And so that's one thing. And then the second thing is how well they contribute to the community. So again, when thinking about leadership, something might be judged as moral or good if they showcase leadership qualities that are like beneficial to all people or most people or the community at large, rather than, being corrupt, right? That's a leadership quality that some people have that is not, in this case, morally good, right? So our paragraph is sort of contrasting that with this belief of more general, like they just say ethicists, right? So the implication meaning, I guess, like modern Western ethicists here. So their argument is the moral goodness of an individual's actions depends solely on whether the actions themselves are good, irrespective of the context. So Purcell's thing is like context matters. Ethicists are saying there is something called a universal good, right? This is a concept in philosophy, universal good. So you can say like, like saving a kitten is like always good, right? Saving a life is always good. Whereas in Aztec communities, it may have been that like if you saved the life of like an invader, that would not be good because it would be bad for the community, right, to get invaded. So you might be able to, that's like a really reductive take, but like that's how these things might play out in this format, right? So let's take a look at the answer choices. So what we're going to say is our prediction is something like Purcell's analysis suggests that, context does matter, and, having an individual or like ethics in a vacuum isn't something that was shared by the Aztecs. Okay. So A says the Aztecs would have disputed the idea that the morality of an individual's actions can be assessed by appealing to standards of behavior that are independent of the individual's social circumstances. Okay, let's hold on to it. B says the Aztecs would not have accepted the notion that the morality of an individual's actions can be fairly evaluated by people who do not live in the same society as that individual. So, like, I'm going to go ahead and cross that out. It may or may not be true, right? But they don't really have any evidence to suggest whether or not the Aztecs, cared about that, right? The reason, when we're thinking like a test writer, okay, the reason that this answer choice is most likely in here is because the paragraph is comparing, emic and Edic perspectives, which in anthropology just means like insider and outsider perspectives, right? Around a central idea. But the people involved, the Aztecs and, the modern Western society that I presume these ethics, like the initial ethics are being attributed to, they're not making that claim, right? They're not being comparative. They're just saying like, look, that's how it is. Done deal. So because they are expecting you to see this contrast, they might expect you, so the test writers might expect you to falsely attribute that contrast to the actors in the story and not the writer or the narrator. Okay, so we're going to cross that out. C says, actions by members of Aztec society who contributed a great deal to their community could be judged as morally good, even if those actions were inconsistent with behaviors the Aztecs regarded as good in all contexts. Okay, so this is not true because they say they also, have like this other component. It's not just one thing, it's both of these. So they're not saying like sometimes a bad thing is good. They're saying like you have to think about the context, right? So you're not just saying like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of another example off the top of my head, but like, let me read this again. Actions by members of Aztec society who contributed a great deal to their community could be judged as morally good, even if those actions were inconsistent with behaviors the Aztecs regarded as good in all contexts. So I guess my preference would be, like, if I wanted to translate this question into a correct answer choice, I might say actions by members of Aztec society who contributed a great deal to their community could be judged as morally good, even if those actions were inconsistent with behaviors that modern ethicists regard as, good or bad, right? regardless of the context. So we're comparing Aztec to Aztec here, and we should be comparing like modern ethicists to Aztec in this case. So this one is not true. D says similar actions performed by people in different societal or social roles in Aztec society would have been regarded as morally equivalent unless those actions led to different outcomes for the community. So I don't like this one. They don't really discuss how the hierarchy works or if there is a hierarchy, right? They just say like, if you have a role in society and maybe those roles are like jobs, maybe it's like mothers, maybe it's gender, right? Maybe it's like something that we don't even know, right? Some other facet of their society that we don't have access to. So this one is A. Okay, 20. Le Luong Min became the 13th Secretary General of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations in January 2013, making blank the first time the organization would appoint a Vietnamese leader. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? So this is going to be see this. So yesterday we talked through some of these questions, but in case you didn't watch that video, I'll just let you know. These should be pretty quick off the mark. It's kind of a you know it or you don't type of question. But we're just going to identify what the subject is. So for example, we're talking about this event, right? Of Min becoming the Secretary General. Okay. So the event, which can be, packaged as like this whole pre-work thing, from her name to the date, that's what we're trying to condense into a subject. Okay. So we know it's a singular event. So it can't be something like these or those or some, because they're plural. Okay, so it's really that simple. 21, last one for today, says in 1929, Edwin Herbert Land invented a polarizing filter that was featured in a number of products from sunglasses to 3D movies. A decade later, Land blanked his technology to invent the world's first instant camera, the Polaroid Land camera. Okay, same type of question. So, this one is a decade later, Land used his cameras or his technology. So this one, we know because, so this is really a tense question. We know that in 1929, the first thing happened, and then a decade later, so in 1939 roughly, right, the second thing happened. So we know it's still in the past. So we're just going to say used, right? Great. All right. I hope everybody has an amazing Tuesday. If you have any questions about any of the answer choices that we looked at today, or if you have a question about a different test, a different question, if you want me to go over one, I'm happy to do that. Feel free to just drop a comment below. Again, my name is Kate, and you can find me online at stembrainstutor.com. Alrighty, I'll see you tomorrow.